Did you buy more Christmas paper than you needed this year? Me too. Let's use one of those paper pads to get a head start on the next batch of cards to donate or send. Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm going to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get started. Today I'm working with the Michaels Recollections 6x6 Classic Christmas paper pad. It does seem like these paper pads were not available at all Michaels, particularly in the 6x6 size, but I was able to pick up a few and I wanted to share some ideas. However, if you don't have this particular paper pad, all of the ideas in this video can be used for whatever paper pad you have in your collection. I did design some of the sketches and templates to go specifically with the paper from this collection so that you can use it with no scraps and use it very efficiently. But each design I can and will use with other paper from my collection. And I think even all of them in this video, I will show you that alternately you could use it with whatever paper you have on hand. I make a point to try to use up even difficult to use pieces of paper. For instance, there's one that has just lots and lots of stripes going across it. And I always struggle, like, here it is. Like, what are you supposed to do with that paper? It's a 6-inch stripe across. And yeah, you could cut that smaller, but sometimes it has sentiments and stuff in it. So I came up with a design, a One Sheet Wonder sketch that specifically addresses that. And the same thing there's one here that will have like these little 4x4 squares, but then also labels and strips along the bottom. So I came up with a sketch specifically for that one. However, I also used another more plain paper in the paper pad for that same sketch, just so that you could see it's not like it only works if you happen to have this weird paper or unusual paper that I've picked up. So what I'm doing here is I'm placing the paper that I intend to use with each sketch on top of it because I want to group everything together and stay organized. I do plan ahead in this way, and I know that doesn't work for everyone. Some people just kind of want to pull a pretty paper out of a paper pad and go for it, and that's great. And I do that all the time too. I will say, hey, I really like this particular paper. Which One Sheet Wonder do I want to use with it? And I'll create that card start to finish. But when I'm doing a big paper pad tutorial like this, it is helpful for me to be really organized and make decisions about a lot of the paper at one time. So I'm placing the paper that I've picked out and the downloadable PDF. So you can go to the website link in the video description. You can download and print each of these off. And I'm putting it inside of a plastic envelope that is 8.5 by 11. There are many sources for them. I get mine on Amazon and I like them because they're very flexible. They hold together well with the Velcro and they have the hole punches on the side. So if you do want to organize them into a binder, you can do that. You can kind of keep them together. I'm starting with One Sheet Wonder sketch number 34. I believe it's sketch 1 that has a very similar look, but sketch 1 has smaller strips in the background, so you could use whichever one you want. I do find that with sketch 1, because those smaller strips do make it a touch more finicky, and so I wanted to do a more simplified version of the sketch. I wanted to take advantage of the fact that this striped paper had the little Santas on the end that are 1 inch tall and 3 inches wide when I cut them in half. So I'm going to mat them at 1/4 inch bigger, and all the mat measurements are also in the PDF, so you don't have to worry about that. And then the rest of the stripes, I'm just going to use the back side of the paper. I really prefer double-sided paper because it gives you a lot of versatility. If this were single-sided and all you had to work with was the stripes, that would be a lot more challenging. This design would no longer work. But I always try to take advantage of the unique elements. Like, I didn't want to lose everything about that stripe paper because some of the stripes were really pretty. Particularly my favorite was the Santa, and so that's what motivated me to use that strip. There was another little label along the bottom that was more generic. It didn't have a Santa, it was just cream, and so you could use that one too if that better suits your project purpose. I'm going to follow the sketch to adhere down my card pieces. What I would do off camera, I would have cut all the paper that I picked out for this sketch and all of the cardstock, and that would all be sitting in that plastic envelope so that then once I've made this card example here on screen for you, I can just mass assemble all of the rest of them. I'm going to stamp a sentiment from MFT's Itty Bitty Holiday set. I really like this set because it has many sentiments, but they're all quite small. And I find that more often than not, I actually need a small sentiment, in fact, an itty bitty sentiment, than I do a much larger sentiment, which is what you often see in sentiment sets. And I don't know if that's just my personal style of card making that makes that work, but if you find that you have lots of sentiments, but you're always trying to find the teeny tiniest one, that is a great collection, the Itty Bitty. And then Simon Says Stamp has Tiny Words, and both of those have those smaller sentiments that you need. You might have noticed that because it was the first time I was using that particular stamp, I did stamp it on the back side of the paper first, just to make sure that it was going to give me a good stamping before I turned it over and stamped specifically on the label because I wouldn't have a second chance at it. Next up, I have One Sheet Wonder template number 33. The One Sheet Wonder templates make a certain number of cards. So the first one, One Sheet Wonder number 34, it made 2 cards per sheet of 6x6 paper. This one makes 3 cards. You cut 2 thin strips and a square along the bottom. I did this because it creates a 2x2 square, and I have seen a lot of paper collections include a 2x2 square. This one that I'm working with today does not, but I created this sketch without this paper pad in mind. This was just another random idea I had, and today is the first time that I'm sharing it, so it's a new sketch for today's video. Of the 6 sketches that I'm using, 5 of them are new. So you wouldn't have seen a video about them before. They may have been posted on my blog ahead of time though, and I will make individual videos for them all later so that I can go a little bit more in depth. I'm going to again mat it on 1/4 inch. I'm going to look up at the sketch as I assemble my card. Here what I'm doing is I'm taking little scraps of cardstock and I'm using that to prop up the different layers because I want everything to look even and flat on the card. So because they all have that thick cardstock on the back, I use Michael's Recollections 110-pound cardstock for most of my matting, which is a nice thick cardstock. If I were to just tape them all down flat over top of each other, each layer would bump over the layer before it, and it wouldn't give a smooth look. So I'm taking my scraps of cardstock and I'm gluing it underneath to create that evenness. I'm going to come back to the Merry Christmas and stamp that in this 2x2 square. The 2x2 square, while quite small, does give you a nice focal point for any embellishment. And I did pick up some stickers that coordinated with the classic Christmas set, also from Michael's. I picked up a sticker pack, a set of cardstock decorative stickers, and a Peace and Joy die cut sentiment pack. And I will be using all of those throughout the video. I will make sure everything is linked in the video description at the end. Also, each of these cards and the cards that the extra cards I made, because there's 52 cards, but I'm only going to show you the assembly of 6. And those are all on the blog, so you can see all the cards I made with sketch number 33. I'm working on sketch number 36. 36 actually is 1 cutting template and 2 sketches because I wanted to accommodate the fact that this particular design had these 3x4 cards which left these 3x2 strips along the bottom. Rather than wasting some of the decorative element of those papers, I decided to cut a second sheet of paper that coordinated with them so that I could use that as well. Instead of being a true one sheet wonder where I only use 1 sheet of paper, I'm going to cut 2 sheets of paper exactly the same and then swap. So I'm going to use the 3x4 cards with the 3x2 strip from the other piece. Hopefully it'll become clear as I slowly assemble this card. I have taken the 3x4 card. I'm going to be using sketch A, which shows you a large 3x4 card in the center. And I'm going to combine it with a 3x2 inch strip. However, this 3x2 inch strip, I want it to appear at both the top and the bottom so that it looks like it's running behind the 3x4 card. To make that work, I'm just going to cut it in half here. So I've glued it down with its mat and then cut it in half. In the sketch, just for simplicity, I do explain how you could cut it first and then mat it. because I think that that's a little bit easier to understand, although it's not necessarily what's easier to do. But I have a very limited space inside the sketch to explain anything, and I do like to make sure that even if you've never seen the video and you've just downloaded the sketches, you should be able to execute on it. I'm going to, again, prop up that layer because that piece that's going along the backside isn't continuous. I'm going to add a layer of cardstock back there so that everything will still lay smooth even though it's not continuous. Then I came up with an idea for how to use that 3x2 inch sentiment with a 3x4 piece. Now, I decided to just lay it on top of the 3x4 piece, but if you actually wanted it to look like it stretched across the card more, you could do what I just did in that other sketch where you cut and separate this 3x4 piece. But I kind of like the simplicity of this, and I think this would be great if you have a lot of 3x4 journaling cards, like Project Life type cards. I think that you could use sketch A or B and wind up creating a lot of cards to help you use up some of the journaling cards. You could create a lot of greeting cards to use up the journaling cards. I like to think about how to use 3x4 in my sketches because it is such a common size for decorative elements in pattern paper that you cut apart, and because it generally, fits nicely. It's a kind of even size in terms of you can cut it out of 12x12 paper, you can cut it out of 6x6 paper, etc. These are the die cut stickers I was talking about, and I'm not going to show you every time I embellish extra cards with them, but I wanted to take a beat and show you at one time so that you knew what product I was using. I have used a completely different sheet of paper, this one with the poinsettias and then the green pattern on the back, and I'm making more of sketch number 36, but I don't have those, I think the sentiments were happy holidays and, I'm sorry, I can't remember, but they already had sentiments for me. But then when I used a plain piece of paper to follow the same sketch, I had to add decorative elements. So that's what I was doing there, and I will do it for some other cards as well. So when you look on the blog and you see those large stickers, that's where that's from. I'll also sometimes use the Joy and Peace sentiment stickers, etc. One Sheet Wonder template number 7 is what I used for these 3x3 squares. This is the one that is in an older, not brand new in this video, template and sketch. I did cut the entire piece that has these 3x3 squares to the 3x3 size. And then I took a secondary piece of paper, and if you look at the cutting template, it shows you the 2 3x3 squares on the left, and then it shows you on the right side how to cut the rest of the paper. So what I did is I took a second piece of paper and I cut just the right side, so just the strips that are needed to go with the 3x3s. And I cut 4 sets of those because this makes 2. Every time you download a template, it tells you how many cards it makes. It's color coded. If you can't print it in color, it's not a big deal. It's still very clear. I didn't print mine in color for a long time. I do generally try to pick colors that even when they're printed in grayscale, it'll still be obvious which ones are, different. But being able to see them on screen in color can make it a little bit more clear because I show you okay, all the purple pieces go together, all the blue pieces go together in the cutting part of the template. So here on this plaid piece of paper, I have now cut the entire plaid piece of paper to the right side, or the strips that are required to go with those 3x3 squares, and you'll see they match up there like that. Okay, so now I'm ready to assemble the card. I do try to go a little bit slower and explain just a little bit more on these videos and provide the printouts just so that if there's anyone who is new to crafting, particularly because I find a lot of people who start their crafting by making Christmas cards. And so I try to be more clear about that in my Christmas card videos so that they feel really welcome and they feel like they can do this, because you can. You can make your own Christmas cards. You can follow these sketches. And so even if you've never made a Christmas card before, I promise you. This is Michael's Recollections Kraft cardstock here in the background. If you were only to get one type of cardstock to mat your Christmas cards, Kraft is a pretty good bet. I like to use white card bases and Kraft cardstock a lot. I am addicted, you might say, to the craft background just because it's so easy. It goes with so many different things, particularly Christmas, but many things outside of Christmas as well. Going to take some of my scraps and I'm going to prop up the side here. So part of Santa is going to lay on that plaid paper, and so I'm not going to put any cardstock there, but the rest of Santa is going to overhang onto my white card base, and so I'm going to put some cardstock behind him to prop that up. While I think that gives a smoother finish, you absolutely do not need to do that. Your card will still hold. It will still look good. It's a very subtle thing. I have plenty of cardstock scraps, so that's why I do it, and I personally think it's worth the look and the time. I just, again, for like those newer crafters, I want to assure you, you don't need to always do all those little extra steps. I decided to add a die cut word to Santa, but I did not film that part. And that was a pre-die cut thing. I literally just glued that word on. I did not have to die cut it because it was part of I had purchased them in a pack at Michael's, which I did think that those glitter die cuts from them this year were really good because they did not shed. They were cut really crisply. They were quite thick, and I'm the kind of person who usually die cuts my layers a few times. So being able to not have to do that because they were really thick was great. I'm moving on to my last card. This is One Sheet Wonder template number 37. Again, this was specifically designed for this pattern paper from the collection that had these 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares. And I am deciding that on the sketch, I will feature one of the 2.5 inch squares and then the other 2.5 inch square, because this is going to, again, make 2 cards. So I will use 2 squares. I will use one of the labels from the side. And then along the bottom, there were those strips. So that one I actually did turn over. I did not use the strips specifically. So I'm going to turn that over and use the back side. So I'll cut those strips to 3 by 1 inch instead of 6 by 1/2 inch is what the strip would be if I cut it separately. If you'll see in the sketch, one of the 2.5 inch squares is on top of the other elements around it, and the 2.5 by 1 inch strip, which is what I'm working with, or label here, was what I'm working with. I'm stamping my sentiment onto. It is also laid above all of the rest of the elements. I am going to tape one of the 2.5 inch squares with the decorative side facing out on its mat, and then the other one I'm going to tape with the decorative side down. I picked the Santa and the bird to be showing, and then the tree and whatever the other one was, I think a present, is going to be facing down. So that's kind of what happened to them. If you really like all of the 2.5 inch squares, if you really want to feature that Christmas tree, just take a second piece of paper and cut it to the same way and use that other piece of paper for the other 2 elements. Kind of similar to what I did with some of the past cards, like when I did with the 3 by 4 and 3 by 2 inch pieces of paper where I had the journaling square ones. Anyway, again, I've matted it, craft cardstock, 1/2 inch, or sorry, 1/4 inch bigger. I find that the way that I like to assemble this is to put down the pieces that are in the back first. It tells you to put the 3 inch by 1 inch square at the top corner, and then the second square gets spaced out a little bit, and then this other square gets laid on top of it. So we want to put those back layers down first. Order that you put these things matters if you're trying to work with this particular paper pad. If you are everything's just pattern paper, you can do it in whatever order you like. And in general, I show you how I would assemble any of the way that, like, any of these One Sheet Wonders. Like, I'm going to cut the paper this way and I'm going to assemble it this way in the sketch. You do not have to do that. It's just a suggestion from me what I think works, so you don't have to do the design work. When I am finished assembling all my cards, I've shown you 6, but there's 52 cards in all because you go to the blog and there's many repeats of those cards. I like to stamp a sentiment inside and sometimes to stamp a little decorative stamp inside as well. So I put a little reindeer in this one, and that finishes off my card. If you found this video inspiring, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty supplies in time. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe, and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.